Good morning, good morning. It's so good to see all of you this morning, and we've got some great panels set for today. My name is Joe Watkins. I'm the host of State of Independence on Lighthouse Television, and it's just a joy to be with you today. Many of the people who appear on these panels today and some yesterday have been guests on the show, so it's just great to be with so many wonderful people who share the values that we all share. In any case, I want to remind you to make sure that you vote in the straw poll. Does everybody know where you can do that? Right over there. That's exactly right. So you'll go right over there to vote in the straw poll. Make sure you do that sometime this morning because we'd like to get the results. So we have a panel coming up right now with two great speakers. They've both been guests on my show. Both Andrew Lewis and Aaron Anderson have been guests on my show. They're going to have a conversation about empowering Pennsylvania parents. And this, is, as you know, is an important topic. So we're excited to hear what they have to say. I'm trying to stay honest to our. Thank you for bearing with me. Well, I don't need this to tell you a little about Aaron. Aaron Anderson, besides being about 6 feet 7 inches tall, is the CEO of Logos Academy. And Andrew Lewis is one of our great state reps. Please welcome them warmly.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. There you go. I get my name is Aaron Anderson. As Joe said, I'm the CEO at Logos Academy down in York City, Pennsylvania, private school. We're going to talk about that exists for kids that can't afford private school. Let me introduce my friend here, Representative Andrew Lewis from the 105th District. Give it up. We're going to spend some time talking about empowering Pennsylvania's parents today, and there's nothing more important on that front than education. But let's just talk for a little bit, Andrew, this morning about both you and I are dads.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think I've got you beat on that, but I don't know that that's a competition in terms of number of kids. But yeah, tell us about your family a little bit.
Sure. Well, Aaron, you have 6.
I have 6. That's
Six.
correct.
Okay. So yes, he has me beat for sure. I have 3, Jeff, Jason, and Jeremy, 3 boys, 7, 9, and 11. But I did grow up in a family with 11 children. So I have 10 brothers and sisters, 6 brothers, 4 sisters. And I was like the 5th child, so not the one that got the most attention.
Well, you learned to navigate.
Yeah, I did learn to navigate, negotiation skills, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of skills.
And here you are in politics. And so we're going to talk about HB 1, House Bill 1, that you've advanced, a really excellent bill. But as we do that, I think it's important as we think about empowering parents in Pennsylvania, this issue of education is really, really critical for us. Why do you think, today as parents are, you look at the last 2 years, parents, I've seen it at Logos Academy, parents show up, they're exasperated, desperate, depending on where they're coming from. But what do you think are the reasons Pennsylvania's parents right now are so hot on this issue of education?
Well, I think parents have had a front row seat to their kids' education now for the last 2 years in a way that previously they may not have had. We've seen a lot during COVID when everything shut down, oftentimes arbitrarily. We had parents who now were kind of quasi-homeschool parents, and they're in the room with their kids, and they're seeing what they're learning, and they're engaged, they're helping them with homework. And I think that really drove a lot of parents to start asking questions and to say, well, what are some of these classes teaching? What is some of this homework? And now I think parents are far more engaged than they've ever been before.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's easy. I think it's easy as a parent to think that sort of schools are all equal.
Yeah.
But the reality is that across the nation, and I lead a school, an urban school. The district that I'm in the past has been ranked one of the lowest performing schools in the district. In Pennsylvania. I think several years ago, of 500 districts, York City schools were ranked number 499. Right, so families show up to my school. They're desperate for options. When we look at schools across the Commonwealth, what do you see as a legislator in terms of the equality of schools that exist out there, just in terms of quality?
Yeah. Well, we hear a lot about equality and equity, but a lot of the same people that are using those terms don't actually allow kids in Pennsylvania to have equality when it comes to access to good education. And the reality is there are low-performing school districts and then there are high-performing school districts where it's still not a great fit for some individual students. I mean, you know this as a dad of 6, each of your children is different. I have 3. All boys grew up in the same household, 2 years apart, but each of them has their own learning style. So what works for Jeff absolutely doesn't work for Jason. What works for Jason doesn't work for Jeremy in terms of getting them a good education. And so I think we need to recognize that in Pennsylvania, and we need to start ensuring that parents are back in the driver's seat when it comes to choosing where their kids go to school and how their kids are educated.
So when we talk about, obviously there is a lot of talk on equality right now.
Yeah.
If you're a family who is a low-income family in Pennsylvania, and let's go one more step.
Sure.
If you're likely also a family of color, what's the likelihood in our current system in Pennsylvania that you're going to have access to a high-quality school?
It's a very low likelihood, very low, especially in underperforming school districts. There's really no mechanism. There's families, and I hear stories from some of these school districts, some in Philadelphia, some in the Harrisburg area, where a mom literally had to win the lottery to get her child to a good school so they could have a great education. And you see these kids are transformed by going from a school that was truly failing them and having a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It shouldn't be once in a lifetime. It should be an opportunity available to all, but they win the lottery, literally, and then they have a bright future.
It's an incredible reality when I get a chance to talk school choice with a lot of folks. One of the things I always say, Andrew, is that everyone believes in school choice. Now, you might laugh at me in a conservative crowd like this to say that everyone believes in school choice, but here's why I say that. Because when you go, especially if you have kids, you and I, when we go, if we sell our home and go move to another area, what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to look for what's the quality of the school. So the reality is in Pennsylvania that you do have school choice, but it's based on a real estate transaction, right? And that to me seems wrong. And so I think the essential thing that we need to get to, and I want to get to talking about HB1, House Bill 1, is I believe the very best thing we could do for families is, one, recognize that our kids are given to us by God, and that they are not wards of the state. Parents have been given to take care of those kids, right? And we need to give parents the power to make sure that they can give their kids an education so that they can succeed. Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely, no, and I think we have to remember that schools exist to educate children. Schools exist to prepare students for life. And parents are paying property taxes. It's only fair that you should be able to choose where your kid goes to school and ensure that they have an educational program that meets their needs. And so that's what House Bill 1 really is designed to do, is to bring educational opportunity to every kid in Pennsylvania. Because what we see, to your point about school choice and how everyone kind of believes in it, a lot of the folks who resist these policies and they resist choice and they fight against opportunity, they actually send their own kids to private school. So what's good for the goose is rarely good for the gander in Harrisburg, and we really have to change that dynamic so that every single person has access to a world-class education.
Backstage, Andrew and I were talking about the fact that, I read recently someone said something like, well, if you want school choice, you have it, you can send your kids to private school. I laugh at that because I know what it costs to actually run a private school. I mean, in York, Pennsylvania, Logos Academy, we are a school that exists to offer private education to kids who can't afford private education. And so on about a $3.5 million budget, we have to raise about $2.5 million a year in private philanthropy to make sure we have a big scholarship fund to fund kids so that they have an opportunity. Now, praise God that God enables us to be able to do that. And there are some programs that we've been able to leverage, but by and large, it's based on philanthropy only. And I get folks, Andrew, who come to me all the time, want to know, how do we start a Logos Academy in our community so kids can have school choice? the number one thing that drives them away is the fundraising reality, because it costs so much to do it. So HB1 begins to address it. House Bill 1 is called the Excellent Education for All Act.
That's right.
And can maybe just give us the contours of what's in that bill?
Sure. So there are multiple provisions. It's the most ambitious school choice bill in the history of Pennsylvania. We were able to rally 50 co-sponsors on the bill. It's in the Education Committee now. And what this bill does is it addresses school choice in a way that we really hadn't done before, because it takes a holistic approach to school choice. And it says, look, if you're a homeschool family, there's what we now call learning pods. If you've homeschooled, you call them co-ops. But a lot of those co-ops are under a threat of being regulated, just like a public school entity is. And so this would enact a protection for co-ops. It would also expand popular and effective tax credit programs. It would enable charter schools to get authorization from a statewide charter versus going to their school board, which may not be pro-charter. And it also establishes the Keystone Hope Scholarship, which says that any parent who wants to send their kid to a private school can take the state portion of their funding. It's roughly a third of the funding, so it costs about $18,000 per student per year to educate a child in Pennsylvania schools. It lets you take about $6,500 of that to a school of your choice. Leaves 2/3 with the public school district, but that is still a heavy lift. Public schools don't want to see even one penny go to private schools. So we're taking that fight on, but that's ultimately House Bill 1 in a nutshell. And we think that by enacting these provisions simultaneously, you're going to really address the entire situation and ensure that there's school choice for every kid in Pennsylvania.
Well, I think this is an important point, Andrew. It's easy when these school choice bills, and there are a number of them across the country, that are probably getting farther than they have in the past, but some are not meeting with success right now. One of the primary arguments when we start talking about school choice is that in some ways this will damage or destroy the public school system. And I don't think any of us want to see that, because the reality is right now about close to 90% of our nation's kids are in public schools. But can you just address that argument a little bit, that this is somehow will undermine the public school system and kill it?
Absolutely. So we have the wrong focus across the country, but especially in Pennsylvania, where we look at educational funding as funding systems and institutions, and it should be about funding students. I want you to so House Bill 1 has been in committee, and we recently introduced a pared-down version of House Bill 1, which is called the Lifeline Scholarship. And it says that if you're a student in the bottom 15% of a school districts, then you can take that Keystone Hope Scholarship, we call it a Lifeline Scholarship, to the school of your choice. And this was met with resistance, but what I want you to imagine for 2 seconds is, imagine if your child was in the hospital, okay, the local hospital, with a sickness that they'd had for 5 years, and it was threatening their entire future, and they were not able to get better. And now imagine there was a clinic down the street that had a cure for your child's condition, and it cost 1/3 the cost for care. And imagine that they cured thousands of kids at that clinic, and you asked the hospital, can I please take my child to the clinic to get them better? And then imagine you said, and the hospital was like, absolutely not. We need your child as a patient for funding for a hospital. And imagine if you said, whoa, what if I leave 2/3 of the money? So it costs $18,000 to cure my child. What if I leave $12,000 in the hospital? I just take $6,000 to the clinic and get my child better. And imagine if the nurses union came out and said, absolutely not, we don't want to lose a penny. You need to fund our hospital, you need to fund our pensions, you need to fund our salaries, you need to fund our administrative staff. We're going to keep your child here where they will continue to be sick. That is what's happening in public schools in Pennsylvania and across the country, and we need to put an end to it and refocus on actually educating students, not propping up failing systems.
I think you struck a nerve there, my friend. I love your emphasis on students and not systems, because that's at the end of the day. For me, when I watch a family, our families who come into Logos Academy, our families household income in my community for my students will range household income from $25,000 to $45,000. Okay, so these are families. So when I hear advocates say that they can afford choice if they want it, so let them go get it. The reality is, in our nation's private schools, the average tuition in a nation private school is about $12,000 per kid. So that's almost laughable to tell a family with a household income of $25,000 to $45,000 that you just go get school choice you want it, go pay for it, right? And so in these children, you know, many of these districts, my home district has about a 64% graduation rate. I think we should be morally incensed that this is happening across. I can tell you as a dad, I absolutely would not stand for it, and that's why we've made some of the choices. But we've enabled, partly, our legislators in the past, probably I think it was almost 20 years ago now, the tax credits, educational EITC, the educational tax credit program. Talk just a little bit about that, because I think it's a technical program, but it has helped us. We secure about $1.7 million a year at Logos to scholarships. Talk a little bit about what HB1 will do for that program.
Yeah, so I'll try to break down these two programs in layman's terms. There's the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, EITC, and then there's the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit, is the OSTC. One is for low-performing school districts, one is for low-income families, and it allows a donor or somebody in business or someone who just wants to help kids to give a scholarship. And then 80% of that scholarship is they get a tax credit. So they're able to have a win-win where they're kind of choosing where your tax dollars go. You're kind of choosing that these tax dollars are going to actually go to help kids get a world-class education. And these kids are either in low-performing schools or they are in low-income families, but there's a cap on the program. Each program has a cap, and once you hit a certain amount of money that went to these scholarships, the state says, no more, we're not gonna do any more tax credits for this. And so in House Bill 1, we've increased those limits substantially, in some cases, more than doubling them, because there are kids on the waiting list every single year to get these scholarships, and they have no other option of where to go. They're not getting a good education. They're either being bullied in school, or they're not getting an education that works for them, or the community is just not supporting their learning needs. And so they're on a waiting list to get in. And so by increasing that cap, we can get them off the waiting list and into a good school like Logos.
Well, I think you've tackled in this bill, you know, our friends at the Commonwealth Foundation have mentioned that this is an aggressive bill. It goes across the board. You're dealing with charter schools. You're offering $6,700 scholarships to any student to be able to go, or funds to be able to go, and then you're increasing the tax credit program. The tax credit program in Pennsylvania right now, educational tax credit program, is about $225 million in it. Last year, Andrew, I believe Commonwealth said 53,000 students in Pennsylvania tried to get a scholarship but could not get access to it because the funds aren't there. I can tell you, I've seen it from a donor standpoint, where we have donors on the waiting list that I could be taking funds for who'd be willing to give, but they can't get the tax credits. And your bill is not only expands those, but also makes sure that when we hit a cap, what happens? When we hit that.
When you hit the cap, there's an automatic escalator built in. We thought of everything here. Okay, there's an automatic escalator built in that actually increases that cap automatically, so we don't have to do it legislatively every year. These fights, by the way, are very difficult fights in the legislature, and my fellow colleagues here will attest to this, that when you try to promote school choice and you try to promote opportunity, there are very powerful forces that fight against that, and they don't want one penny. They would end these programs in a heartbeat if they had the opportunity to do so.
Well, and one of the criticisms that I hear and read constantly is that the people who will take advantage of these programs are just wealthy people who already send their kids to private schools. I want to say, as a school leader, where our school, Logos Academy, 65% of our students, our board bylaws stipulate 65% of our students will always be kids who are living in poverty or who are near it. So we created our school and locked it down to be a private school for kids who are poor, okay? I can tell you at Logos Academy, our average EITC scholarship this year was almost $8,000 per student, $8,000. The average low-income student at Logos Academy in York paid a little over $1,000 to get a private education. Wow. Right? That's pretty incredible. So when you hear the data that's put out there about these are just wealthy kids, I can tell you, I can assure you, I just met with some kids yesterday who are pleading to get in, and the only way we can do it, the only way we can afford to do it and keep people on staff are through these types of programs. So they literally are a lifeline.
Wonderful, and that's the goal, is to provide that lifeline. And I just want to make two very quick points. One is, when it comes to this argument that we're somehow defunding public education to provide opportunity. It's blatantly false because we're funding our public educational systems at a historic level. The average student in Pennsylvania is about 18.5 per year, $18,553 is what it takes on average. The national average is closer to $15,000 a year. So we're already higher, and in many of these underperforming school districts, it's closer to $20,000 per year is what we're spending on these students. And what Aaron's saying is, guys, we have a program that's mostly funded privately by donors who are generous, partially funded by parents and students through a small out-of-pocket fee. But if we could have access to these programs, it'd be life-changing for just a fraction of what it costs at a public school. And the final point I want to make is with respect to transparency in schools, because whenever we fail to provide the opportunities through whether it's these the Keystone Hope Scholarship, what we then want to bring is transparency so that the parents that are kind of locked in these schools at least know what's going on at the school. So I introduced House Bill 1332 this past year to make sure that every parent can get online and see what their kids are learning in school, what textbooks they're reading, what curriculum they're learning from. And that has been a fight because not only did a lot of folks on the left not want them to have opportunity, now they don't even want them to see what their kids are learning, which absolutely is baffling. So that is a fight that continues. We got it passed in the House and Senate. The governor did veto it, so we got to get a Republican governor this year, all right? And then we're going to get that signed into law.
So how many parents are here? Parents of school-aged kids. Can you just shout out real quickly? I see a lot of hands, and I know we've got some grandparents in the room. Thank God for you as well, right? Andrew, let's just talk last 90 seconds here about what people can do right now, because I think we're at a critical moment in terms of getting some school choice across the finish line. Yeah. We're close, but what are you asking these folks to do here?
I would say this is the moment to make your voice heard. We're going into, frankly, a primary, and especially as people come asking for your votes, make this issue a priority. When you talk to them, get engaged, let them know school choice and opportunity is very important to you, and then when they're elected, they're then gonna know they promised this to you, so then you can hold them accountable for the promises they made. I think it's very key, and if you're not able to engage, say your legislator's not opposed and they're not asking you for what the issue is, then engage with them after the election. Engage with them when we go into this next session of the legislature and make sure you're making your voice heard. Email, call, go find my legislator, Pennsylvania, Google that, see who your legislator is. Most everyone in this room, I know you're patriots and you already probably have called me and emailed me, let alone a lot of legislators. So continue to make your voice heard, let them know it's important to you and that you're watching and that you need to see movement in the legislature on these issues.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think just in a final comment, we're here talking about empowering parents, right? God gave these little ones, you've got 3, I've got 6. They are gifts from God. Right. Parents are stewards of that, and it's our job to do everything possible within our power to make sure that they can succeed, that they can have opportunity. Education can do it. Andrew, thank you for what you're doing with HB1.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.